You're listening to the Paisan Sports Podcast, brought to you by your hosts, Dante de Placido and Zach DiLiano. All right, welcome to the Paisan Sports Podcast. I hope you guys enjoy the new intro. Spent the entire day on that, believe it or not. Very simple intro. Took me an entire day. But anyway, I am Dante de Placido, joined, of course, by Zach Deal with What's the Deal Sports. Now, Zach, as president and CEO of What's the Deal Sports, I must ask you, what's the deal with the Phillies? They played great all season, and now they stink. What's going on?
I don't even know where to start, Dante. I mean, first off, stranding runners in scoring position the past couple nights. I mean, it's been absolutely horrible. We've seen a couple sack flies, but the amount of base runners that they have and what they're producing run-wise, especially versus these bad teams. We went to the game last Thursday, and they ended up beating the NL East Atlanta Braves that have had their number, along with the New York Mets, the entire season. 1-0, which was pretty much a shocker, but the team played pretty well besides not producing any runs. And the non-production in the run-scoring department has just carried over versus a worse team in the Cubs. So, I mean, like I said, stranding guys on base. We've had multiple bases loaded situations the past couple nights, and nobody is converting. When I was on my way over here today, top of the sixth inning, 2 guys on base, 0 outs, and 0 runs scored versus the Chicago Cubs. And not only are they in trouble of losing this entire series, but getting swept by the Chicago Cubs in the third to last series of the season. Absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah, it's very unacceptable. And now with this loss today, and if the Brewers win tonight, that officially knocks the Phillies out of that final playoff spot for now. And if that happens, I have very little confidence they can regain it. I don't think the pitching is too bad. Currently, we've had some very good pitching lately from Zach Wheeler and Ranger Suarez and Aaron Nola. But the hitting, the bats, they've just been absolutely non-existent. They did kind of get screwed a little bit in the third inning today, with the scoreboard at Wrigley Field being off, saying it was a 3-ball count. So when another ball was pitched, Gene Segura started walking to second and got picked off at first, because in reality it was a 2-1 count. So a little bit of a screw job there in the third inning, but who knows if anything would have happened anyway. I don't have confidence anything would have happened anyway. This team looks awful.
Yeah, like I said, there's no confidence to have, especially with the way the bats are performing. Like we said, we even touched on that win last Thursday versus the Atlanta Braves, and they scored 1 run. And they were just lucky enough that the Braves obviously didn't have their best player in the lineup, who's on the IR, in Ronald Acuna. But, I mean, these bats have to produce, especially in this time of the year. And this is a trend that we've seen happen over the past couple seasons, where it gets late into the season, they're in primal position to go and get that first playoff berth with Bryce Harper on the roster. And I don't want to harp, pun intended, too much on Bryce Harper, but...
Oh, pun was intended.
But... I mean, Bryce has to perform better. Today, he was a little bit better than he was in the past, but since coming back from injury, his batting average has dipped under 300 significantly, and it doesn't look like any of his teammates are picking up the slack themselves. The defense has been bad as well, too. There's been bad fielding, bad decisions. Brandon Marsh, I mean, he was another guy that stranded runners today in a huge situation. I think he was the last person to come up in the top of the sixth with 2 guys on base and not come through. Just flied out to right field. So, I mean, this team, this is not what you do at the back end of the season. And even if they do make the playoffs, do I have confidence that they're even going to win a game? What's the point of making the playoffs if you're not going to do anything with the opportunity? So even if they do squeak into the playoffs, it is not encouraging to see them drop a series like this to the Chicago Cubs, especially in this part of the season. You have an easy series on paper coming up, but then you end the season where if you're vying for spots up until game 162, you have to play the Houston Astros to end the season. So I'm not confident at all moving forward.
It's not looking good, but to go against what you said about what's the point of going into the playoffs if they can't go anywhere, I'll tell you what the point is. The point is the last time the Phillies were in the playoffs, I was in middle school. I am a 25-year-old man now. It's been a long time since I've seen them in the playoffs. I've never gotten to enjoy a Phillies playoff game at a bar before. That's something I want to experience while I'm still in my 20s, for sure. So I think, to me, that's why I desperately want to see the Phillies in the playoffs, just to see them in there, just to go to a bar, go to Xfinity Live, catch a Phillies playoff game. You know what I mean? Get to experience Red October during my 20s. If my 20s end and I never got to experience Red October and it happens for the first time in my adulthood while I'm married with kids and can't really enjoy it, I'm not going to be happy about that. So, Phillies, please, squeak your way into the playoffs. I don't care if you get swept. Just get there.
Well, on a positive note, they do have 4 games. Like I said, I alluded to that series coming up. They have 4 games to get right versus the Washington Nationals. I'm not taking any splits. I'm not taking a 3-1 series win. They need to sweep the Washington Nationals, and that's all that can really be said about that situation. And like I said, they end the season with the Astros, who are not arguably are the best team in the AL. So, I mean, it depends on how the Astros roll out in those last couple games with all being clinched up and everything, and how hard they're actually going to play and what pitchers they use. But this next series versus the Washington Nationals, they need to get right and sweep in 4 games. And I think they moved the doubleheader to Friday instead of Saturday. So they have 2 games on Friday now, which is a plus, but that could also be a curse in itself too, because playing 2 games in a day, the energy levels might not be the same from both games. So, but like I said, I'm not accepting anything under than a 4-game sweep on the Washington Nationals, and I think not only am I not accepting it myself, I think that's what needs to be done to even qualify for the playoffs.
Yeah, I think if you take 3 games out of 1 against the Nationals, if the Brewers win tonight, you're no longer at a point where you control your own destiny.
Even right now, it's literally 83-72 is the record for both teams.
Yeah, so you do need to sweep the Nationals, but I do have good news for you. The Astros are currently 17 games up in their division. So more than likely, the Astros will have nothing to play for by that final series, and hopefully they'll be resting starters. And that's currently the problem with the Brewers playing the Cardinals, is the Cardinals have clinched, so they're resting starters from what I understand, and it's easy wins for the Brewers, so that's part of the issue there. But there is some silver lining in what is looking like a dreadful disappointment of a Phillies season, and that is Andrew Painter, who just took home Minor League Baseball Pitcher of the Year award honors. Andrew Painter has had one heck of a season down in the minor leagues. He started out in the minor leagues in Single A, worked his way up to Single A plus, and then worked his way up yet again to Double A, where I believe for the entire minor leagues combined this year, I believe he has a ERA less than 1.5. I will double check that really quick, but I do believe I am correct. And on top of that, he's also throwing 100 miles an hour on the gun. The one caveat that I did see while I was looking at Twitter is somebody who was at one of the games noticed that, actually, yeah, I am correct. So 1.4, his ERA, 1.48 ERA. So sub 1.5. Anyway, I did notice on Twitter, somebody who was at one of the games noticed, once he got to about the 5th inning, I believe it was, he went from 100 miles an hour to, I believe, 96. So that could be a little bit of cause for concern. And I know the Phillies organization, throughout the minor leagues, didn't really leave him in there long. I remember when he first started in Single A, they were having him throw 4 innings in each outing. So Maybe stamina is a bit of a cause for concern, but while he is on the mound, he is absolutely dominant.
Do you think he should have already been brought up?
No, he's only 19 years old. I think next year they'll start him out in AAA, and then there's a good possibility he's up in the major leagues midway point of the season. But there's no reason to rush a 19-year-old into the major leagues, especially when you have all the starters that the Phillies had this season.
I mean, regardless of age, I would have liked to see him get a spot start with some of the injuries in the pitching rotation earlier in the season. But I think when I asked that question, and you're talking about in a situation like right now with 2 series left for the season, like I said, I would agree with you that I don't think he should have been brought up at this point. But it would have been nice to see him get a spot start in one of those summer months where they could have fit him in versus a lesser team and see what he got. Regardless of if you truly believe that he's ready for the majors yet, it would just be nice to see him out there and see his chemistry and how the team backs him up, especially with run production. Because we see other guys across the league that are absolute studs, have low ERAs, and they just can't win games because of their situation. That was almost an issue. I mean, Noah Syndergaard's ERA was nothing special whatsoever when he was in Los Angeles, but he really did lack a lot of run production from his offense to where that would lead to wins, and that's why his record was so bad. But I don't think they really have anything to lose next season. Like I said, I think he'll start out at AAA and then make his way up to the majors. But I just hope it happens very quickly because I don't really see the solution on the roster right now for their pitching rotation behind Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler moving forward to have a stud third guy. You know what I mean? I like Ranger Suarez and the spots that he gets in. Kyle Gibson, you know how we feel about him. He's up and down a roller coaster ride, has a good record, but when he starts bad,
Zach.
He's bad.
I will say, you're kind of speaking on both of our behalfs. You've been on record saying you like Kyle Gibson and you think he's a good pitcher. I've been on record saying he stinks. I don't say he's up and down. I say he's down. He had one good start. The rest has been all down. So you can say, you know how you feel about Kyle Gibson. I know how I feel about Kyle Gibson, and it is not the same as how you feel about him.
I mean, I feel like you highlight his lowlights more than you actually give him credit for when he does pitch well.
Because there's far more lowlights than.
But that's not what his record suggests. That's just not factual. How could you be 10-7 and have more lowlights than highlights?
Record is the most overrated stat in all of baseball, in my opinion. It's completely reliant on how the rest of your team performs around you. If Kyle Gibson gives up 5 runs, but the Phillies put up 8 and he gets the win, that's not really reflective on how good he is. I think a stat that's a very underrated stat in baseball that should be focused on more is quality starts. Now, a quality start in baseball is when you pitch at least 6 innings and give up 3 runs or less. So I think we should be judging pitchers not off of their overall record, but off of their amount of quality starts.
I mean, yeah, I guess I agree with you in that type of sense. Kyle Gibson does beat up on the lesser teams, and when he plays against better competition, yeah. But like I said about the pitching rotation and how we got here and Andrew Painter, this was just saying I don't believe in them having a guy on the roster right now, like I said. So I wasn't trying to speak on your behalf, but what I was saying wasn't inaccurate to the point where they need another guy behind Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. But yeah. I was just alluding to Kyle Gibson as the bridge guy right now. There's a reason why he's 10-7. And it's like you said, you play the lesser teams. That is what it is. You play against the competition that you get in front of you. But yes, he has not performed well enough against the good teams to where you could even feel confident putting him in a starting rotation for the playoffs. So I do agree with that.
I wouldn't even bring him back next year. If I'm the Phillies, I think next year the ideal rotation. I mean, obviously, Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola and Ranger Suarez, who he's been fantastic in the second half of the season. Do you bring Bailey Falter back? I think that's a question mark. Noah Syndergaard, I don't know if I would bring him back, but then I would like to see Andrew Painter eventually in the majors next year.
And you can't narrow this down to just 5 guys, too. You need to have flexibility as well. You need to have long relievers. You need to have guys that can replace at times. So when you're thinking about this topic and this conversation, you can't just narrow it down to 5 guys and just clean cut it and just cut it off the top like that. You need to have flexibility, like I said, and have like 7 guys that you feel confident in having like that. Obviously, that's a luxury. You're not going to have 7 guys that are absolute world killers. That's just not how it is. It's hard to have even 2 guys like they have right now that are pretty dominant when they go onto the mound, but they need to have flexibility. So it's not just a dry cut situation where you get 5 guys and that's that. So, but next season is next season, and the Phillies right now just have to worry about making the playoffs. So, but you alluded to another playoff team in the Cardinals that have things clinched up and wrapped up. They won their division. Albert Pujols, we posed the question on the last podcast, which we did a live stream for on Facebook on a Wednesday, if he was going to hit 700 home runs when he was at 698. We go to the Phillies game Thursday night together. Nothing happens with the Albert Pujols.
We almost saw one live on the TV. But
yeah,
real quick,
with the duped announcer.
Yeah. But real quick, before we get to that, you did mention 5 guys for the Phillies. Now, speaking of 5 guys, our podcast today is sponsored by 5 Guys Burgers. No, not really. Would be cool, though.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned for that.
It could be. Anyway. Yeah, no, I do remember we were walking towards our makeshift seats, and we looked up at the TV, and we thought we saw 699 for a second, but the ball died out early. But then, do you remember what night it was where he hit 2 home runs?
It was Friday night.
So
let's start here. Not only does he get 700, he hits 2 in one game to get to 700. How much more special does that make that moment?
You know what? I'm gonna say I think it makes it a little less special, and I'll explain why. Because when you're at 698, right, that game Friday, nobody viewed it as the game Albert Pujols may hit home run number 700. So I think if you went into that game with 699 home runs, you go in, there's a bit more excitement in the air, in my opinion, because now he's at 699. Is this going to be the night he hits 700?
But you also have to put the value in the element of surprise. Like, what were the odds of, I don't even know what the betting odds on there. His betting odds for him to hit a home run at any time, just one home run, were probably under, I would believe, like 400, just because you knew how hard he would be pressing to make that happen. But for him to hit 2 home runs in a game, you just don't even see that really that often, people hitting multi-home runs in a game. And that's just the element of surprise to where when a guy's hot, he really gets hot. And not only did he hit 2 home runs in the game, he hit 2 home runs in the game versus the best team in baseball.
Yeah. No, so I definitely see your point there. It does make it more special in a sense. I think I was strangely a little disappointed he hit 2 in one game. I kind of wanted to
I do agree with you because it did catch me. It caught me off guard.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like if I'm at the game, like I'm absolutely rolling. You know what I mean? But I got the update. I wasn't able to watch the Cardinals game. I'm not sure. They probably were had the stream up or had the broadcast up on Fox or something big because they knew the moment that it would be. But yeah, I mean, when I got the update and I realized, like, oh, I thought it was at 698 the other day. You know what I mean? And then I saw that 2 home runs were hit in that game. For me, that at least made it like even more impressive. Like no one thought that he was going to eclipse 700 home runs that game and probably ever in his career.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I mean, this season for Albert Pujols, although he has definitely picked up the hitting from where it was last season.
It's almost very reminiscent of like, I don't know if I can lump these two in the same conversation, but it's like JT. Like JT barely had any home runs to begin the season.
You're
that was the same with Pujols.
I
know it's definitely a far-fetched stretch. Just like saying that thing is. But to start off the season, the bats were not looking live. Like Albert was barely even playing, so that's where that distances the comparison. But now they're both like sitting at like 20, 21 home runs on the season and really have picked up the power in their bats. So that's more so what the comparison I was making. But we have another guy reaching history Aaron Judge. We also posed the question. We went back and forth about the AL MVP battle, and I think it's pretty much wrapped up by now since Aaron Judge hit home run 61.
Yeah,
So,
my argument for Ohtani winning MVP is not looking as good. However, I will say it's not like there was any question he would hit 61. I do
but
think
there was at the end, like not from our pod when we were talking about it on the last podcast. Yes, I agree. But since then, everyone started walking him in crucial situations. I mean, the one night I had an anytime home run from him, plus 190, and he comes up in the top of the 10th, and they just walk him to load the bases.
he got walked a ton over the past
What was it?
week.
I believe correctly, the number was like upwards of like 25. I think I want to say 27 walks. This month, if I believe correctly. That could be complete, absolute BS. But I'm almost positive I saw since September that he's been walked 27 times.
Yeah, well, that's crazy. But it still does not top Barry Bonds once being walked with the bases
well, that's
loaded.
what I was just about to bring up.
Yeah,
too.
nothing will ever top that.
And just the walks that he was producing every year.
Yeah. No, his on base percentage was crazy just because people were just not pitching to him. But talking about Aaron Judge, talking about him hitting home run number 61 finally after being walked every at bat for an entire week, that brings us to our new segment, which is our Meatball of the Week. And for this week, I elect my Meatball of the Week as a guy by the name of Frankie Lasagna. Frankie Lasagna was the fan out in left field during last night's game who reached over to catch Aaron Judge's 61 home run ball, which would have been worth a lot of money. The ball went into his glove, the fingertips of the glove before landing in the Blue Jays bullpen, or I don't know if that was the Blue Jays bullpen or the Yankees bullpen, but into the bullpen. Frankie Lasagna was very... It just sounds silly saying Frankie Lasagna. But Frankie Lasagna was visibly upset. He threw his glove. I think he slammed his hat. I mean, it's a tough break. You know, you had your fingertips on what's probably $100,000, Frankie.
Oh, at least.
At least $100,000, Frankie. And unfortunately, you dropped it. And Frankie, I'm sorry. But because of that, you're my Meatball of the Week.
I mean, I don't really know what to say, Frankie. You bring your glove to the game for a reason. If the team needs to call on you from the stands to get out there and produce some plays, and that was your calling. That was your moment. You go as a sports fan your entire life. You go to that game as a grown man. What were we talking about when we were at the game on Thursday? Remember the whole era and the culture growing up of bringing your glove? It was a dead set thing. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You're bringing their glove. Nobody brings their glove now. But if you know a historical home run is going to be hit, which is also crazy that we have intertwining seasons where Pujols did what he did all-time wise, and Judge, non-steroid era, is eclipsing that record. It's actually pretty crazy that the two are coming to a head in the same season. But both of those games, when they're on the brink of those records, you are bringing the gloves and you're ready to go. So, I mean, you get your glove on the ball. You're in the outfield for a reason. How you were sending me the ticket price for the Aaron Judge tickets for the outfield for the next game. What was it? Upwards of $600?
So there's very limited availability currently. The cheapest I saw for left field was about $600. The second cheapest, over $900. So more realistically, those tickets are probably sold by now. That was this morning. So if you want to attend the next Yankees game and you want to sit in left field and try to catch yourself an Aaron Judge home run ball, that's going to cost you about $900. But hey, let's say you want to sit in right field. You're just there to enjoy the game. So you sit in right field. $300. It's a lot cheaper. Granted, and now I'm not too familiar with how often Aaron Judge goes the opposite way, but maybe there is a small possibility of Aaron Judge hitting a home run to right field, because then I believe third baseline is a lot cheaper at like somewhere around $175. So maybe that's also a little inflated on the possibility of Aaron Judge going the opposite way. And then even at the series for the Yankees versus the Rangers in Texas, left field you're looking at about 174, and then in right field you're looking at about $70, which if Aaron Judge does not hit a home run in this upcoming series at home against the Orioles, that price is probably going to go up a lot, because right now it's probably cheaper in Texas because they're more than likely Aaron Judge might hit a home run in the series against Baltimore. So if that series wraps up, he's still at 61. I'm sure that price for the Texas series goes way, way up.
Let me pose these two situations to you, and let me see what you think about it. So imagine number 62 is hit in two different ways. There's two possibilities that could absolutely screw over the fan base, and especially the people that are buying the tickets in the outfield for itself. So imagine if Aaron Judge's 62nd home run of the season, how much would it actually count towards the record if it was an inside-the-park home run?
That's a tricky
and
one.
You know the player is going to be respectful, whatever outfielder, however the ball, whatever happens. We're talking about maybe a 0.00009% chance this happens. But whoever has the ball while he's crossing home plate after the inside of the park of the home run, you know they're giving it back to him. You know that ball's going in. They're not throwing that into the crowd. And if there's probably a bench-clearing brawl that's going to break out if that were to happen.
Yeah.
Before you answer, or 62 is off the foul pole and back into play.
So if that were to happen, that would be absolutely hilarious. That no fan ends up with 61 or 62. Now, whichever fan ends up with the final home run ball, maybe hit 63, that goes in the stands. Yeah. That's still worth some money. But you know what I wish? I wish the series against Baltimore was in Baltimore. And do you want to know why?
Why is that?
In the entire history of Orioles Park, other than the home run derby, which was done once by, I believe, Ken Griffey, nobody has ever hit a home run that has reached the warehouse in right field. Well, you know what? Now that I think about it, Aaron Judge going opposite way all the way to the warehouse doesn't seem very likely either. But that would have been, you know what? Yeah, I wish the warehouse was in left field or Aaron Judge was a left-handed batter or whatever. I just think that would have been incredible if, for number 62, he becomes the first player to ever hit a home run off the warehouse. But we won't see that happen. Now, real quick, before we get into some Eagles talk here, I do want to say I've become fascinated lately with the idea of the home run cycle, which was done for only the second time in professional baseball history this year.
Let me ask you this, though. How do you become fascinated with something that's so rare, though? You know what I mean?
It's because it's so rare.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm saying, like, how does that even spark your mind to, like, how much home run cycles are even in the database?
That's what I'm getting to.
Okay.
So only the second home run cycle in professional baseball history was hit this season. And for the listeners who are unaware, the home run cycle is when you hit a solo shot, a 2-run homer, a 3-run homer, and a grand slam all within the same game. And that was done in the minor leagues this year. And the last time it happened was in the minor leagues in the 90s. It's never happened in the MLB before. There was a baseball player, I forget by which name, quite a few years ago, at least since 2010. I forget when exactly, though. But he almost did it. He hit 4 home runs in one game, and I believe he hit 2 2-run homers, a grand slam, and a solo shot. So if there would have been one more guy on base during a second 2-run homer, he would have had it. And I'm just curious, will I ever see it in my lifetime? I don't know, but I kind of want to witness it happen, because after hearing about that guy and remembering a home run cycle happening in the minors earlier this year, now I desperately want to see a home run cycle.
All right, this is the last thing we're going to touch on with baseball, just because you posed it. So,
okay.
What is the rarest thing out of these 3 options that could happen?
Okay.
Someone eclipsing 700 career home runs, just like Albert Pujols did. Again, obviously not Albert Pujols himself.
Right.
somebody breaking the record that Judge just is currently about to break, hopefully, if he does break it, and get to 62 non-steroid era home runs, or seeing a home run cycle?
I think, first of all, you have to rule out 700 home runs because
even a guy like Aaron Judge, like we talked about, Albert didn't even hit 50 home runs ever in a season in his career. It was more so about the consistency and steady. Aaron Judge got called up when he was 25 years old. Now he's brink of like 30. He had another 57 home run season, and I think there was another 53 home run season. So he had two of those, and then now he has the season now too. Even if he keeps up the pace of like 40 home runs a game, he's not really even going to come too close.
No, he's not sniffing 700. But Albert Pujols is now the fourth hitter to reach 700. So when you've had four guys reach 700 and you've never seen a home run cycle, I think the home run cycle is more rare. And then the other one you mentioned was, what was the other one again?
It was the 700 plateau. The
AL home run record.
Yeah. Well, the non-steroid home run record. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's the AL. I mean, technically, it's the non-steroid era home run record, but that's just another way of looking at it. But more officially, it's the American League home run record. But that's the thing. Hey, Aaron Judge, he just tied it, So if he can do it, maybe somebody else can eventually do it. No one's ever done a home run cycle, though. I'm going to say that's the most rare. But anyway, segueing off of baseball talk.
Okay, so you just gave your meatball of the week.
You
want to hear my meatball of the week?
Who's your meatball of the week, Zach?
You see how my lips are purred right now? Carson Wentz.
Carson Wentz.
So you see me loading up the C.
You saw me great meatball.
Yeah, you saw me loading up the C with my lips. Carson Wentz. I was kind of defending Carson a little bit on our first episode of the Paisan Sports podcast, and there was no defense at all. Like I said, my biggest gripe with the Philadelphia Eagles was the pass rush, and I still can't believe that they ended up getting 9 sacks. Brandon Graham was the NFC Defensive Player of the Week. Back-to-back weeks for Philadelphia Eagles defenders winning NFC Defensive Player of the Week. Jalen Hurts, while we're touching on it too, just won NFC Offensive Player of the Month, so that was huge. But Carson Wentz back there just... What is the man doing? What is he doing? I don't even know where to start. It's not even like I can be analytical because there was sacks in all different forms. Him just straight up dropping the ball where it looks like he wasn't really even swiped that hard at with Hassan Reddick. Brandon Graham gets like 5 seconds to get back to the quarterback and blow his tackle up. Like Brandon Graham was winning off the line of scrimmage. Fletcher was winning off the line of scrimmage at times, and they used a lot of 5-man fronts to get those matchups to make that happen. But there was also a lot of times where he's got the ball in his hands for over 4 seconds, just sitting in the pocket, just like a statue, and just eating up sacks in crucial moments. And I'm just trying to figure out what Carson Wentz is doing. You would think Carson Wentz would try and at least get the ball out early and not take up all these sacks versus old team and some of his old friends like Fletcher Cox.
Here?
But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be optimistic for the guy, but he just does it to himself all the time. And it seems like the big moments, too, because his passing numbers going into this week were pretty decent. He was in the top of leaderboards. Obviously, still turned the ball over, and he lost a game. But his passing stat numbers, but when it truly matters versus old team that drafted him second overall, Carson Wentz is the same Carson Wentz that we've known to, love in Philadelphia, but that we've come to know in Philadelphia.
Yeah, well, I would like to allude to what I said last week because you mentioned, he had good passing stats going into this week. It's like I said last week. He can have all the good passing stats he wants. And, I'd mentioned Commanders fans were trying to, say, his stats look good. He's actually playing a lot better than people are saying he are. And then the Colts fans are telling them what we were telling the Colts fans last year with, don't look at his stats, look at what he's doing on the field. And Wentz kind of proved that yet again this past week because, by the time the game ended, his passing numbers weren't really that bad. But when you watch the game, he's just standing there in the pocket. And at one point, it was almost like he was just standing there just waiting to get sacked. I mean, it is.
And usually before, you would see him like loading up and like pump faking, looking to make throws. He was like
He was
standing
just standing
still with the ball in his hands.
It was unbelievable.
And like you said, his stats didn't look that bad by the end of the game. Besides when you equate the sacks, because quarterbacks on their passing yards, the team passing yards takes a hit with the sack. So that's where that graphic came up. Where what was it? The Eagles had so many total yards, and they had the Washington passing yards had -1.
Yeah, but that's not counted against Wentz's.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's only counted against the team. So, and that's unfortunate sometimes for player props, like when Daniel Jones is taking sacks and they're not actually getting counted. When I had Daniel Jones rushing under and he's getting sacked, but it's not taking away from his rushing total, more so the team passing total. But like you said, the stats weren't that bad at the end of the day. Did it feel like Terry McLaurin went for 6 and 102 at all?
No, but I'm very glad he did because he's on my fantasy team. I still took the loss, actually.
Because
Alvin
there was
Kamara,
guys getting like volume out there, like he's been targeting Curtis Samuel a lot this season, and some other guys, and a lot of people like Terry had 6 catches for 102. Curtis Samuel had at least 6. Yeah, exactly. Curtis Samuel had 6 or 7 catches himself. So I mean, the ball was getting moved down the field, but there was literally nothing to back it up. There was no production. They barely scored on a touchdown that Antonio Gibson had to reach all the way across the goal line in, and he ended up with a 12-point fantasy day. Pretty much nothing out of the backfield. So I mean, even with the salvageable effort on paper, I mean, if you watch the game in the eye test, Washington was never in that game to begin with at one point in time.
Yeah.
Never.
No, and that's the thing with Wentz is in games where he loses, he kind of just pads his stats towards the end of the game in garbage time, and then you look at his stats and you're like, whoa, Wentz is actually better than everybody says he is. No, he is not. He stinks. Last week I said he was awful. You said I wouldn't quite call him awful. No, I would definitely call him awful. He is terrible. I was literally laughing at how he was just standing in the pocket waiting to get sacked.
But I think it was funny he was getting sacked by the older guys.
Yeah.
I thought that was even funnier,
Cox,
especially his former teammates
Brandon
that
Graham.
he's won with before, guys that he's more connected to. But one thing that we will say is, I mean, a lot of people have the Eagles consensuously ranked in the top spot on their power rankings right now.
Yeah.
So the level of competition that he's playing against, I mean, we're talking about a lot of people's one, if not at worst, third best team in the NFL right now. Some people still have the Bills up there, but there's just way too many injuries with the Bills losing their safety for the rest of the season. Their other safeties banged up. 2 of their most important players on their defense, Tre'Davious White has yet to play this season. They're getting banged up all over the place. They did just sign, while we're touching on it, they did just sign Xavier Rhodes, so that should help a little bit. But Philadelphia Eagles, consensually atop the power rankings for a lot of people. They're bringing back, I know they went down to Washington this past week, but now they're facing another familiar foe, and the only coach to ever bring a Super Bowl to Philadelphia, Doug Peterson. So before we get into the game itself and what's going to happen on the field, pre-game, what type of reception are we expecting for Doug Peterson in his return to Philadelphia?
No, I keep seeing on Twitter people like don't boo Doug Peterson, don't boo Doug Peterson. I don't think that's actually going to happen. Everybody keeps saying don't boo him, but like I don't know of one person who's like, oh, I'm going to boo Doug Peterson when he comes to the game. I think he's going to get a very large reception. I think the debate I've been seeing lately is should they give him a video tribute when he comes back, or should they just let the fans cheer for him naturally? I'm a little on the fence. I'm leaning a bit more towards cheer for him naturally because at the end of the day, he is the opposing coach we're going up against. But, you know, he did bring us our only Super Bowl, so.
I mean, a lot of people are kind of like equating it more to where now that he's still coaching in the NFL with another team, it's not the appropriate time to give him a reception like that, but I'm entirely different. Maybe if he's coaching the New York Giants, which he took, I believe correctly, he went on a interview with them, but didn't obviously end up getting that job. I think you got to give the guy credit. He's the only coach. I mean, how many times, as much as people still root for the Chiefs and love Andy Reid, and there's the Eagles fans that truly root for the Chiefs, like are almost like not diehard Chiefs fans, but they really seriously root for the Chiefs unless they're playing the Eagles. I think the dude deserves his receptions, deserves his flowers. I don't agree, like I said, with just because he's still coaching in the league that you have to react a certain way. We're talking about the only man to bring a Super Bowl and get over the hump, and what a special year that was. And I mean, you saw how quickly that team crumbled, so they truly had something special that year. There's not much more to say to it. But, like you said, there's not anybody that's going to tell you on a Wednesday or a Thursday or even a Friday this week, like, oh, I'm not going to boo them. But once you get the tailgate flowing, you get the beers inside of you, you know what I mean? And you're trying to root hard for your Eagles.
Booed.
But I don't think he's going to get booed either. But there is going to be a couple, a couple meatballs in the crowd that are going to be acting a certain way.
Delco,
you know what I mean?
Maybe some people from Delco.
We still have some Carson Wentz fans sprinkled in across the crowd like Parmesan cheese at the link. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't say like Parmesan cheese at this point. I mean, probably
we're talking about like
5 in the entire
link.
We're
talking about the Kraft yellow cheese, like not even the good cheese, you know what I mean? Like, sprinkled in like that. But that was probably the biggest issue why Doug Peterson got fired, was because he held on to Carson Wentz as a starting quarterback for way too long, and then by the time Jalen Hurts was in there to relieve him, it was pretty much a done deal. So speaking of done deals, pun intended, we're going to have some bets out later on today. But let's talk about the on-field performance and what's going to happen on Sunday. Jags, Eagles. What are you expecting?
So I mainly feel confident about a win on Sunday. I think the Jaguars' offense has looked very good, but I think right now the Eagles probably have the best secondary. Well, I'm not going to say the entire secondary. I think they have the best group of corners in the league in terms of Darius Slay, James Bradbury, and Avonte Maddox.
Okay, so since you brought that up, lowest passer rating allowed. 15.3 from J.C. Horn, which is very, very respectable.
That's nuts.
DJ Reed Jr., who barely gets talked about as an offseason acquisition for the New York Jets, 16.0, which is extremely respectable as well. As a veteran, they're probably targeting the younger guys a little bit more, but Sauce Gardner has held up his own as well. Darius Slay comes in at 29.3. Guess who's fourth? James Bradbury, 30.5. And we didn't even get to talk about Avonte Maddox because you didn't just say the best two corners. You said the entire corner group.
Absolutely.
Avonte Maddox had that phenomenal interception and 8 tackles on Monday Night Football. So, everybody's stepping up.
And then last week he had that incredible goal line stop.
Oh, on Logan Thomas.
Yeah,
which
that was
absolutely
unreal.
Ridiculous. You want to talk about size difference like that. That's, 6'7", 260 on 5'9", 205.
Absolutely unreal. And I mean, not only is he making big plays like that, big tackles, but I believe he also had a really nice pass breakup in that game as well. The three of those guys are just shut down corners. So you take that into an account. You take into account the D-line and the pass rush looking a bit better. I know both me and you were in agreement on Sunday's game that had it been just about anybody else but Carson Wentz in at QB, you would have been looking more at like 3 sacks rather than 9. But still, the pass rush is looking better. And plus, Trevor Lawrence is a young quarterback, gonna have to play at the Link for the first time when I think the Link is going to be very loud and very fired up. So I think that's going to affect him a little bit. I think he's still going to have a good game on offense, but I don't think it's going to be as good enough of a game on offense to overcome what the Eagles are going to do on offense.
With saying that, though, if you want to touch on Trevor Lawrence and performing on the road, he's coming off an absolutely phenomenal performance versus the Chargers. Like I was telling people, it wasn't that far-fetched to believe the Jaguars could win that game, especially with the Cardinals and the Chargers and how they were banged up. But to win in that type of fashion, they absolutely blew the doors off the Chargers in L.A. And I know the fan base, the home field advantage is not anywhere near as close to a lot of teams in the league just based off of moving the franchise from San Diego to Los Angeles and still transitioning from that. But the way that in the fashion that they won that game has me a little bit not nervous, I would say. I do think the Eagles are just too good all around, and I consensuously, to hit on that topic, I'll have them at the top of my power rankings as well. But a lot of people had the Jaguars poking into their top 12 in the power rankings, and I think it's justifiably so. The young guys are finally performing well. Everybody was making fun of Christian Kirk for the amount of money that he was given this offseason, and he's completely lived up to the billing and probably even more just based off the narrative from that signing. And it was one of those things where the fit, you said Doug Peterson is a QB whisperer, and he gets guys going, especially in their second year. That's when they started to really ramp up. But to see it actually come to fruition, I mean, Trevor Lawrence is playing phenomenal football right now. And James Robinson. You got to give credit to James Robinson,
Yeah,
too,
and shout out James Robinson. He's on my fantasy team.
He's going crazy.
I did mention Alvin Kamara earlier. Alvin Kamara, you are now benched for James Robinson. You have given me a total of 14 points through the first 3
A lot of that has to do with Jameis Winston, though. That's like the Baker Mayfield, Jameis Winston effect of their confidence in themselves being the former number 1 pick in the draft. And then you have a pass-catching running back that's the best player on your offense, and you don't use them.
Yeah, it's a shame, really. So, I mean, for now, Kamara, you're benched. James Robinson, you're in. But, yeah, no, the Jags, they look very, very good on offense. Absolutely. So, I think they're still going to have a good game offensively on Sunday, even with how good the Eagles' defense has been. But I don't think their defense really is going to have an answer for the Eagles' offense and Jalen Hurts.
I think I would tell you I would 100% be more nervous about this game if it wasn't in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I'd be.
I mean, you can say that about any home
road
road game, but I mean, the way that the Jags are performing, I think if they went home, especially with Doug Peterson bringing the Eagles into Jacksonville instead of vice versa and him coming back, I do think his players are going to step up to the billing for him. But I think the Eagles are going to just be so energized for this game.
Yeah, and I do think that's going to be a big reason they do win. I think, I think the fan base is very excited right now. They're very hyped up. So I think the link is going to be very loud on Sunday. And Trevor Lawrence is a very young quarterback, so I'm not sure how well he'll respond to that. So I do have the Eagles winning this one. I'm a little confident they're going to win. Still a little bit nervous. I think I was most nervous going into the Vikings game. I thought that game could have went either way, but they beat the brakes off them. So, but yeah, and then I think before we wrap things up, I think we should give Jalen Hurts his own spotlight for a little bit, because as we mentioned, he did bring home NFC Offensive Player of the Month, and it's very well deserved. It's looked like he's improving each week. One big note I noticed in the game against Washington, I remember there was a certain play where he had a lot of time in the pocket, and you know what? He stayed in the pocket and he delivered a very nice throw. He didn't see nobody open and immediately try to run somewhere. So I think that's the big sign of maturation from Jalen Hurts, to where now he's just standing tall in the pocket and delivering the ball instead of immediately looking to run.
Well, that's what impressed me the most about last week's performance was I thought it's not crazy to see crazy passing stat numbers and statistics from him in a game in general, just because he's that level of a player, he's that impactful and that big of a playmaker, but usually it comes off of him with the threat of his legs. And I think last week he had 20 yards rushing and just was dotting people up in the pocket. I will say the Washington secondary is absolutely awful. We're talking about one of the by far worst secondaries in the entire league, and that's been their biggest gripe. They also didn't have Chase Young, but like we talked about earlier, in baseball, you play against your competition that you're playing against, and there's nothing you can take away from Jalen Hurts in that performance this past week. And it was good to see him not throw a touchdown and the offense score 4 rushing touchdowns week 1 and get one from the defense. And you're like, oh, they won the game narrowly, and just a gradual improvement where as a passer he looked phenomenal in week 2, and it just got even better in week 3. So I was getting a little nervous that after the week 1 performance that it was going to be the same old story about him fleeing the pocket and using his legs a little bit too much. Detroit came out really aggressively and were blitzing him a lot, so that had a lot to do with it. But now I think defenses are realizing there's nothing you can really do to slow this man down. Whether you want to blitz him, he's going to make the right read now. If you give him enough time, he's going to let things develop in the pocket and not flee the pocket. But when it gets down and gritty, especially in the red zone, he's going to find a way into the end zone with his legs. So, I mean, the man is looking like the full package right now. And I see a lot of credit from the Philadelphia fan base and just Philadelphia in general. I just hope it's not a Lamar Jackson type deal where Lamar Jackson also got his conference, AFC Conference Player of the Month, and he still doesn't get the credit that he deserves. And he's still not a good passer when he's leading the league in passing touchdowns and this, that, the other. So hopefully Jalen Hurts gets the credit. I mean, he's right up there as a 3-0 team, as one of the last 3-0 team in the NFL. We're going to see the other one on Thursday Night Football tonight, but he's getting the credit from Vegas and the Bucs being third in the MVP odds.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, I mentioned this last week. It's really a shame about Lamar Jackson. I mean, what more does the man have to prove to you?
It's almost like you can't even, his own organization can't even justify the right value for a contract for him. Like, what more does this dude have to do?
It's insane. I mean, like, where did we go from, I remember when we were kids, right, and the way the NFL was at the time with guys like Michael Vick, at that time, it was like everybody was so impressed by a mobile quarterback. It was like, wow, look at this guy. Look at how he can run as well as how he can throw it. And now, if you're a dual threat quarterback in this league in today's day and age in the 2020s, it's looked as a bad thing that you're mobile for some reason. If you're a dual threat, everybody's just like, oh, he's just a running back. Oh, he doesn't actually throw it. But, you know, currently Jalen Hurts is doing both very well. Lamar Jackson, I mean, since he had his breakout second season, he's been doing both very, very well. And it's like people just want you to stand in the pocket and never leave and never make anything happen with your legs. Except for if you're Josh Allen, apparently. I
think
know.
so. People are accustomed to just looking at it from one side. Like, usually the running quarterbacks now aren't good passers or vice versa. Like, Daniel Jones actually can run a little bit, like I said.
Stinks.
But he sucks as a passer. He's so bad as a passer.
He's not even that great as a runner. He fell down a couple years ago.
Yeah, but he is going for an 80-yard run. You do have to give credit where credit's due. I mean, the one thing that Daniel Jones probably does best is his running ability.
I'm not going to give Daniel Jones credit for anything.
But, I mean, a lot of people, like you said, are like, it was fascinating and enamoring to see a guy in the early 2000s do something like that. Everybody loved the Michael Vicks of the world. But, I mean, nowadays, I feel like people like equate a running quarterback to like a Tyrod Taylor level of skill of passing, which just is not true. There's definitely those guys floating around the league that can only really have a job from running the ball, but we're talking about a guy in Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts that I don't know what they could do as passers. I mean, Lamar Jackson's MVP year, he threw 36 touchdowns and 6 picks, but he's not throwing for 4,000 passing yards, so people think he sucks.
And that's the thing, too, is part of the reason he's not throwing for that many passing yards is because he's also getting it done.
Exactly. You got to look at the total
legs.
yards.
So
that's like also, that would be like saying like a running back like Alvin Kamara's not that good because he's never rushed for 1,000 yards. And then you look, he's made 5 Pro Bowls in a row, and he started off his career with 3 straight seasons of 81 catches. And you're just completely diminishing that value just because as a traditional running back, he's not providing high-level numbers just based off because he's doing other stuff as well.
Yeah. It's just absurd is what it is. Hopefully, Jalen Hurts doesn't get pigeonholed as a quote-unquote running back as long as Lamar Jackson has been pigeonholed.
There's still clamors around that. People still say that, and it's not even like in a joking manner. It's like a true, actual belief that people think that, which just even blows my mind a little bit more. But last topic of the day that we're going to touch on, we got the Paisan picks of the night. Here we go. Thursday Night Football. We actually have a really good matchup. And I'm very intrigued by it. Like we said, one of the last 2 3-0 teams in the NFL are matching up, the Miami Dolphins. Their entire team was on the injury report. That's something else, a conversation maybe for another day. We can touch on it a little bit right now. Tua, when he gets hurt last week in game. How do you feel about that situation? It was apparently a back injury, but I mean, the way he was doing the chicken dance, it did not look good, and you saw his head slam against the turf. But on a 3-day turnaround, he's ready to go. He obviously went back into that game. Looking at the actual hit in itself, I believe it was a head injury, but for him to go back into the game and seeing the visuals of that actual play playing out, I don't think there's any chance that he would be back in the game in any capacity if it was a head injury, because that looked really, really bad. So how do you feel about that situation?
I think it was a head injury.
So you think he gutted it out in the second half with a concussion at least?
Yeah, I mean, listen, these kind of shady things happen all the time in the NFL. So I wouldn't hold it past the Dolphins to send their QB back out there with a head injury. I know most NFL players are serious competitors down to the core, and I think just about any quarterback, if their team was okay with them going back out with a concussion, I think most quarterbacks would, just because they have that competitive spirit in them. So it's not really something I look at as Tua sending himself back out there with a head injury. I think it's, the Dolphins organization or coaching staff or whoever made the final decision sending him back out there. But, I mean, yeah, you look at the fall he took, you know what I mean? He definitely hurt his head there. I mean, look, I don't exactly want to say shout out to Tua for going back out there, because I've seen the movie Concussion. I've seen what head injuries do to people. I think if anybody has a serious head injury, they should step nowhere near a football field. But hey, man, you came back out and you got it done.
I just think from what I saw, I don't think there was any chance that it could be a head injury just based off him coming back into the game, because the way that he looked disoriented after that play, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you could field a football field and not look and at least give off the imagery of visual effects of being that hurt. You know what I mean? I just don't think that's logical. But they did say he was back, tensed up, this, that, the other. But let's get to the Paisan picks of the night to end the podcast.
Whoa, did you just say Tua in the podcast?
I mean, you can throw that in there. Did I or did I not?
Who knows? I guess we'll never know.
Who knows? But Paisan picks of the night. What's the deal, sports? Done deals. Here we go. For mine, we have a no sweat parlay promo on FanDuel, and this is what I'm rocking out with. I have two different parlays set up. They're a little bit different. They incorporate some of the same elements, but they're a little bit different. So I'm going to take the over, which is in both parlays, over 44.5. So let me read the first parlay, just not to confuse you guys. So plus 424, 4-leg parlay on FanDuel using the no sweat promo. Over 44.5 total points. Joe Mixon, alternate 50-plus rushing yards. Miami Dolphins, alternate spread, plus 7.5. Tua Tagovailoa, alternate passing yards, 250. So that's parlay one, plus 424, 4 legs. So for this promo, you had to at least eclipse plus 300 or 400 odds. I think it was 300, but I could be wrong with 400. So this is a little bit riskier of a parlay. We're going to scratch the alternate spread from the first parlay, and we're going Miami Dolphins money line, which is plus 160. So that's going to juice things up a little bit. Joe Mixon, 50-plus rushing yards. And even though he's banged up, I still believe he's going to go that. And the Miami Dolphins are allowing 5 yards per carry this season. So I really like that number when I equated that in there. And we're going to go with the over 44.5 again. Plus 529, 3-leg parlay.
All right, there you have it. Now, for me, I'm going to keep things very simple for 2 reasons. One, I did not fully look at all the picks before this. And 2, we're about to head out of here, and I am very, very hungry. Have not really eaten all day, so I'm going to keep it simple. Jalen Waddle, anytime touchdown scorer, and I'm going to take the Dolphins point spread. I think the Bengals, although they beat the Jets last week, as an Eagles fan myself who's seen it in 2018, I think this is looking like a bit of a Super Bowl hangover.
So you got Dolphins plus 3.5.
Yes.
Cool.
Dolphins plus 3.5.
I don't think
Jalen
that's a
Waddle,
bad bet.
anytime touchdown scorer. Lock it in. That's going to do it for us tonight. This has been Zach Deal with What's the Deal Sports. Don't get confused by the intro. Listen, I'm trying to get him to change his last name to Zach Diliano. We're Paisans. You can't be a Paisan with the last name Deal.
You know, it is what it is. Everyone's got a little bit of Metagon in them. You know what I mean? We had
Not
a Metagon.
me.
We were Meatballs earlier trying to set this up. We should have the live stream back up working next week. So we'll be live on Facebook. So we'll have some visual imagery for you guys, which we'll have for this podcast too, but being able to comment and chime in with us and ask us questions, we'll have that back up for you guys next week. So thank you guys for tuning in this week. Zach Teo, like we said, and Dante DePlacido, and we're about to go get some food and watch this game. So
Sayonara.